Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Maria Olivia Bryant, and accompanying me is Mr. Jarvis Brown. We are celebrating Black Music Month in the month of June in the year of 2020. Now, this has been a national month of music ever since the 70s, when Jimmy Carter definitely felt that it was the right thing to do because Black music had influenced so much of the 20th century. So what is the topic of today's celebration? The resilience of Black music. Why the word resilient? As the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as an adjective, it is capable of withstanding shock without permanent deformation or rupture. Notice the opportune word is permanent. The second definition is tending to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Now, we all know that our history didn't start in North America, Central America, South America, West Indies, or the Caribbean. It started out of the great continent of Africa. And let's just be mindful. You can put 32 Americas in one continent of Africa. So it's pretty huge. Let's take a look at the video, Out of the Roots of Africa. I think out of all of the queens, my favorite one was definitely Queen Sheba. So there, you've gotten a glimpse of the roots of Africa, how we were stripped from royalty, civilization, brought over into the Americas, the West Indies and the Caribbean, through the transatlantic slave trade and the Atlantic slave trade. Do you realize that over 150 years of capturing slaves, over 15 million Africans were brought to North America, Central America, South America, the West Indies and the Caribbean Islands, to produce, to crop, to farm, to cultivate, to transform worlds and build. They had to be resilient people. There were over 190 ships. We hear mostly about La Amistad, but we don't hear other names such as Amazon. We don't hear that over 190 ships brought men, women, boys and girls, and they packed them into the vessels, worse than you would treat an animal. African American music cannot be separated from the transatlantic slave trade and the forced transportation of millions of African people across the Atlantic who were enslaved. The cultures from which they were torn and the conditions into which they were forced both contributed to the sounds of African American music, Black music. Many of the instruments historically used in African American music, including the banjo, which was used a great deal in the country music, and the drum, having antecedents to African musical instruments and many features common to African American music, likewise have roots in Africa. Musical traditions such as the call and response song form an immersive approach to singing. Out of the depths of Mississippi and the Deep South, slaves began to communicate. And initially it was pretty difficult because remember, many weren't brought from the same village or the same continent, or from the same village. So their languages weren't all the same. They couldn't communicate, but through music, they could communicate and understand. And one song that Harriet Tubman would use so often when she helped slaves to become free was "Wade in the Water." And that song was to signify and let them know, get off the track and off the field and get into the water. So now that your scent wouldn't be depicted. Wade in the water. The Jubilee Singers sang these wonderful hymns and spirituals all around the world. They were all former slaves and later become fifth Jubilee Singers. Let's sit and enjoy Wade in the Water.
Children, wade in the water. God's not gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's not gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
I stepped in the water and the water was cold.
God's gonna trouble the water.
It chilled my body, but not my soul.
God's gonna trouble the water.
I know to wade
in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
If you don't believe I've been redeemed,
God's gonna trouble the water.
well, just follow me down to Jordan Street.
God's gonna trouble the water.
Don't you wade in the
water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. are gonna trouble the
And indeed, the water was troubled. And sacred music continued, which included spirituals and gospel music. It illustrates the central role that music plays in African American spiritual and religious life. The earliest form of musical expression in America, spirituals, were based on Christian songs and hymns and merged with African music styles and secular American music forms. Spirituals were originally an oral tradition and imparted Christian values while also defining the hardship of slavery. Gospel music originated in Black church and has become a global recognized genre of popular music. In their earliest manifestations, gospel music functioned as an integral religious and ceremonial practice during worship services. Now, gospel music is also marketed commercially and draws on contemporary secular sounds while still conveying religious and spiritual ideas. One song that comes to mind when I think about gospel music transforming from gospel to secular is Lift Every Voice and Sing. James Weldon Johnson and Rosamond Johnson, two brothers out of Jacksonville, Florida, wrote the song, put music to the song, and they taught it to celebrate Abraham Lincoln's birthday, not knowing that this song would be considered years down the road as the African American national anthem. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Folk music is another type of genre that Blacks were influenced and started. Folk music is a source of motivation, well-being, entertainment, and survival in diverse lives of African Americans, has afforded them experiences of signifying their humanity amidst horrific oppression, while engaging in creativity, worship, and rituals of celebration. Rooted within African traditions, where sacred and secular are one, some African American musical genres are more fluid, engaging a tension between how people label and use music. Two wonderful artists that I immediately thought of with folk music is Buddy Guy and Nina Simone, and we cannot forget Miss Tracy Chapman. This music shares common traditions and attributes, using themes of poetry, praise, protest, philosophy, and politics. This analysis of African American sacred and secular music. It introduces the social, historical, cultural, and terminology of music. It also examines selected musical typologies. Out of folk music came the blues. Now we remember Lady Sings the Blues, Miss Billie Holiday. We also remember Ray Charles. And we cannot forget Mr. B.B. King. Blues from the foundation of contemporary American music. And as did sacred and folk music, the blues also greatly influenced the culture and social lives of African Americans. Let's see if you remember this song. In the gifts God shall get, and this not shall lose. So the Bible says, and it still is news. Your mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child who's got his own, got his own. Oh, money, you got lots of friends crawling around your door, but when money is gone and friendships end, you don't come around anymore. Relations get bread and such, empty pockets they never make too much. Oh, your mama may, Papa may have, but God bless the child who's got his own. Who's got his own. Now, you probably never thought about the Black influence on military music. Beginning with the Revolutionary War, African Americans have always held a significant role in the armed services, military band tradition. In the Revolutionary War and Civil War, African Americans served in the fife and drum corps. Musicians that played in military bands during World War I and World War II often incorporated modern musical styles such as jazz into their song selections. They also toured the United States and Europe, entertaining civilian and military audiences alike. Now, we cannot at all forget about the father of jazz, Mr. Jelly Roll Morton. And out of Mr. Jelly Roll Morton's compositions and his involvement with Duke Ellington, a wonderful movement of Black music arose called the Harlem Renaissance.
The Harlem Renaissance is one of the most iconic cultural periods in African American history. Throughout the decade of the 1920s, Black writing, art, and music flourished, ushering in a cultural revolution that rocked the United States.
One of the most important factors that accounted for the rise of what we know of as the Harlem Renaissance is the migration of Black peoples from the South to urban centers like Harlem.
The Jim Crow era begins after Reconstruction, and every Southern African American had to think about, what should we do? Should we go or should we stay? For many of these people, it was a matter of life and death, literally.
Sometimes in the most repressive times, we create the most extraordinary art.
Amidst the fervor of the Great Migration, bold, exciting forms of Black music evolved, along with venues to listen and dance to this music. Blues and jazz clubs became a central part of life in Harlem, where artists such as Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, Bessie and Mamie Smith rose to prominence.
Then began to cry. He went away and never even said goodbye.
The era also saw the burgeoning of literary work by and about African Americans, which the writer Alain Locke compiled into an anthology. He called it The New Negro, and its name came to define a movement.
The Harlem Renaissance is a facet of a larger movement that we think of as the New Negro movement, where you have a new generation of Black people, by this point, 2 generations out of slavery, using the arts as a way to help people gain broader civil and political rights.
Some of the framers of what became the Renaissance make the argument that the artistic worth of a people has to be proven by the worth of the art and literature they produced, especially for people that historically, over centuries, have been defined as without culture, without history, and without any record of achievement.
The Harlem Renaissance was the flowering of creativity that had been suppressed for centuries. People that had the sense that things were opening up. And finally, we can be the people that we imagine ourselves to be.
Now, wasn't that spectacular? The dancing, the culture, the poetry. The Harlem Renaissance was a wonderful time in New York. And after the Harlem Renaissance, the rhythm and blues became another great genre. The predecessor to soul music, R&B is another stylistically diverse genre with roots in jazz, the blues and gospel music. R&B helped spread African American culture and popularize the idea of racial integration on the airwaves and in white society. Today's iteration of the genre has assimilated soul and funk characteristics. This beautiful lady here, Mary J. Blige, is considered to be the queen of R&B. Now, we go right from R&B into rock and roll. You said, what? Black people had a great influence of rock and roll? That's that word resilient again. We've had influence of all music genres. We have here Fats Domino called the Fat Man. Listen to his technique that began rock and roll. Rock and roll music incorporates elements from all African American music genres and combines them with the American pop and country music components. The genre was born in the 1950s and appealed to the rebellious yearnings of American youth culture. We have great rock and roll musicians, and one of my favorite, of course, maybe because she's sweet, maybe not, but Miss Rosetta Thorpe up here, and Prince and Chuck Berry, and Mr. Little Richard. Now, if it wasn't for Chuck Berry's style and Little Richard, Elvis Presley wouldn't have been as popular, because he got much of his style, even his looks with the hair, from these two gentlemen.
How'd this rock and roll all get started anyway?
Well, what they call rock and roll now is rhythm and blues. I've been playing for 15 years in New Orleans. you excuse me, I'd like to go back to my practice, huh?
Punk rock and Afro-punk is another genre that blacks have influenced. The term originated from the 2003 documentary Afro-Punk, directed by James Spooner. In the early 21st century, Afro-punks made up a minority in the North American punk scene. Notable bands that can be linked to the Afro-punk community includes Death, Pure Hell, Bad Brains, Fishbone, The Templars, Unlocking the Truth, and Rough, Francis, and many more. In the United Kingdom, influential black musicians associated with the late 1970s punk scene included Polly Stern of X-Ray, Specs, Don Leeds in the Basement. Afro-punk has become a movement comparable to the early hip-hop movement in the 1980s. Hip-hop and rap. Musical traditions firmly embedded in African American culture, like jazz, hip-hop has become a global phenomenon and has extended a driving force of the development of mass media. Hip-hop music spawned an entire culture form, while rap remains a means of artists to voice opinions and share experiences regarding social and political issues. We cannot forget about Don't Believe the Hype, Public Enemy, and the ladies of hip hop and rap. Let's zoom in to this video called Freedom.
We will not bow down to racism. We will not bow down to injustice. We will not bow down to exploitation. I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. Now this is time for free your mind and soul. I swear I'll never be told. Ladies, it got to come on, but to want you, what we want is respect, guys. Never take a walk with me, also walk with me, see what only I can see. This guys, check this, watch this. Turn us loose, set us free from all the chains that bind me. Let us run in our own direction. Let us go, set us free from all this propaganda and lies that your people try to teach us. I know why you would like to bring us down, because we have all the good on you. You try to tell us that our lives don't mean anything, but we know so much better, so we're gonna take out the freedom. So give me more room. Deny my opportunity, you in jeopardy. No, set me free, don't end up and let me be. I'm fighting for freedom, I got the heat in case you need them. Straight soldier, ain't nobody told ya. We've been together since I created order. The African border celebration is important. My only chance of being free is to fly within me, and it's illegal to kill a freaking Negro. A bird is never more important than my people. I guess we didn't need him, so I took away his freedom. My
Now, as you see, Black music has enriched America. It has enriched the world, and it continues to have great influence. The list of musical styles merely scratches the surface. In addition to the genres previously detailed, African American musicians and artists have also developed influenced classical music traditions, country and western, pop music and dance music, such as disco, techno, and house. Among other genres and styles, millions of people around the globe listen to and are touched, transformed, healed by music that carries elements of African American musical traditions. These two gentlemen, Mr. Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, were great visionaries and musicians and music producers. It was because of their sound, the Philly sound, that the Gamble and Huff recognized the struggle that was going on throughout North America. The purpose of Black Music Month is to promote and protect Black music. Kenny Huff and Leon Gamble, along with Edward Wright, CBS, and others knew economically, Black music was all about the money. Black music would create jobs and transform culture as it has. Notable singers like Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Teddy Pendergrass, the OJs, the Jacksons, Phyllis Hyman, Lou Rawls, Archie Bell, and the Drells, Gene Carney, Bill Paul, and so many more were under the great Huff and Gamble music productions. Without such powerful music, we've had so many movements, and we're currently in what they consider the second phase of the civil rights movement. We mostly hear about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, but we've forgotten so many of our great civil rights leaders, as Fannie Lou Hamer. One song that she loved was "This Little Light of Mine." So I want you to sit and listen to her testimony as she shared who she is and why she ran for politics.
The testimony before the Credentials Committee, the FDP had a lineup of very different people. They had Rita Schwerner, the widow of Mickey, who had been killed in Neshoba County. They had Martin Luther King. Everybody knew King.
The seating of the delegation from the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party has political and moral significance far beyond the borders of Mississippi or the halls of this convention.
But the highlight of the testimony was that of Fannie Lou Hamer. The sharecropper who had been evicted from her plantation had come to symbolize the Mississippi movement.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, it was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen.
The president, Lyndon Johnson, he's not afraid of Martin Luther King's testimony. He's afraid of Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony. And so he decides that the country should not see her testify live.
Johnson is in the White House, and he convened an impromptu press conference.
We will return to this scene in Atlantic City, but now we switch to the White House and NBC's Robert Goralski.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
On this day, 9 months ago,
He did it knowing that they would break away, thinking he might announce who his choice of vice president was going to be. Instead, he gets up there and he announces, get this, he announces that it's 9 months to the day since Governor Connolly, who was there, was shot along with President Kennedy. So he announced a 9-month anniversary. Everybody's scratching their heads.
thank you very much.
And then he leaves. And by that time, Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony was over. However, it backfired on Johnson because it became a story that she had been taken off television, and in the news that night and for days afterwards, they replayed her testimony.
I was carried to the county jail and put in the booking room. They left some of the people in the booking room and began to place us in cells.
She had Mississippi in her bones. Martin Luther King or the SNCC field secretaries, they couldn't do what Fannie Lou Hamer did. They couldn't be a sharecropper and express what it meant, right? And that's what Fannie Lou Hamer did.
And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrol. He said, "We're going to make you wish you was dead."
Let us not forget what the civil rights movement was truly about. The right for Black America to be heard, to vote. As John Legend says, now the war is not over. Victory isn't won. We'll fight to the finish. Then when it's all done, we will cry, glory, oh glory. We'll cry, glory, oh glory. Victory is won. What if Miss India.Arie is a rhythm and blues artist, Grammy Award-winning artist, and she says it so beautifully in this song that I want you to listen to. What if?
What if Martin didn't stand up? What if Rosa didn't sit down? What if Malcolm didn't man up? Where would we be now? What if Marley didn't get up, stand up? What if Du Bois didn't come to advance us? And Mandela didn't come to teach us? Where would we be now? We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. 'Cause it is up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. Our love can change the world. What if Maya didn't speak out? What if Langston Hughes didn't write it down? What if Josephine Baker didn't dance it out? No. Tell me, where would we be now? What if Sojourner never told the truth? Or Ida B. Wells never printed the news? Harriet never went underground. Where would we be now? We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. We can change the world with our love. It is up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. Me too, I matter, you matter, we matter. Together we are love. Me too, I matter, you matter, we matter. Together we are love. It's gotta be all of us to stand up and speak out with all of our love. Love, 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 love. 'Cause it's up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We could change the world. Our love will change the world. We will change the world with our love, 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 love. Our love will change the world. Oprah, Kamala, Ava, Tarana, and Lena, Serena, Viola, Oprah, Patrice, and Alicia. You and me are the chosen. Right now, this is our moment. We are a people of motion. Our love's gonna change the world.
Our love will change the world. Our voices will change the world. Black music has transformed the world. We pay homage to many of our great deceased musicians who made such an impact. Michael Jackson, James Brown, Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross, Sam Cooke, Billie Holiday, and the list goes on. Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, and the list goes on and on. Luther Vandross, Gerald Levert, Barry White, Isaac Hayes, Sean Levert, Rick James, Bernie Mac, and the list goes on and on. The importance of Black music, why give it a label? Why have a meaning? Black, African American, whatever you want to call it. But Black America contributions and African American involvement in the nation's music making has influenced every genre of American music, helping to create a sound now recognized as distinctively American, reflecting both the hardship and the triumphs Black Americans have experienced in the United States. Black music has also served to shape the national identity, profoundly influencing the lives of all Americans. Millions of people around the globe listen to and are touched by music that carries the elements of African American traditions. And it doesn't stop. We're now into a new generation of musicians, of Black musicians, that are impacting this world by song, by music, by instruments, by acting, by singing, by dancing. Take a listen to Mr. Keedron Bryant out of Jacksonville, Florida. 12 years old, his mom wrote the lyrics and said, you know, I want you to go in the room and do what you do. And this is what he came. When he came out of that room, this is the tune he put to those lyrics.
I'm a young Black man, doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted and prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've got enough struggle. I just wanna live
just wanna leave.